All right, welcome to the Agronomics of Hemp webinar. We're excited that so many people are joining us today. That's great. I'm Heidi Johnson. I'm the Agriculture Institute Director for Extension. And this webinar, as many of you probably saw, came about relatively quickly, and that's because there was a series of events that took place over the last couple weeks that led us to feel like we needed to put this together. First of all, Leah Sandler was hired at the Michael Fields Agriculture Institute, and she had recently finished up a PhD on hemp at Purdue. So we're really lucky to have her in Wisconsin. And when she got here, she had talked to some of us in Extension about trying to put together some informational session for farmers on the agronomics of growing hemp, because information is so limited and farmers are really looking for this information. So that's what happened. Also, what is going on is that federal restrictions that were lifted recently have also allowed the UW to start working on hemp. So we're going to have a series of research projects going on across the state to look at the agronomics of growing hemp. And that will involve some of our county extension educators and our agronomy specialists, both extension and in the agronomy department at UW. So we're hoping this will be the first in a series of webinars about the agronomics of hemp. As we noted in the marketing materials, this one's going to be focused on planting and field prep. And then as we move throughout the season, we'll be looking at the agronomics as you move through. Obviously, the knowledge about growing hemp is pretty limited at this point in Wisconsin, so we are going to be learning really quickly, and we're hoping to be sharing what we learned throughout the season. Our extension specialists and some of our county educators will also be holding some field days throughout the year to try to allow people to get out and see what's going on in those fields. This webinar is going to be recorded, and so we are going to be trying to launch relatively soon an extension website that will be the host for all of the materials that we have on hemp. And so we'll be getting that together as quickly as we can, and we will be loading this webinar series on there. We will also load on there the webinar series that was done by our extension educator in Brown County, Liz Benversi, in February, and that addressed some other topics. So we'll try to put those all in the same place. We'll also try to have some contact information for extension people or other people that can help to answer questions and address some of the issues out there. So the way that this webinar will work today is we're going to have presentations that are going to start on the hour every hour from at 9, 10, 11, and 12. We'll open it up for questions after each of those topics, and we'll let those questions go as long as they can until the next hour starts. If the questions finish up a little bit early, we'll take a little break, and then we'll restart again at the beginning of the hour with the next topic. So we did it this way so that people can sign on and know exactly when each topic is going to start. We'll break those topical presentations up into different recordings, so those will be available so people can watch them individually or all together. So we're going to be starting out with Department of Ag, DATCP. They're going to be talking about all the legal issues surrounding hemp. And they did DATCP did a presentation just a month ago for Liz Benversi for that webinar series, but obviously things are changing really quickly. So we're going to have DATCP step in now and talk about that. And we're going to be switching seats every time we do this to give you the best view.
My name is Melody Walker. I'm with Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection, also known as DATCP, and we'll refer to it as DATCP from here on throughout the presentation. And I will be talking about kind of the basics of the Industrial Hemp Research Pilot Program, some of the laws, some of the statistics, and a few program basics, and then Brenda von Rueden, who is our new hemp program manager, will talk about specifics for growers. So that's what we're going to be doing. So this is currently the Industrial Hemp Research Pilot Program, and we are operating under the guidance of the 2014 Farm Bill. Even though the 2018 Farm Bill has passed, we are still working as a research pilot program under the 2014 Farm Bill. And so we have the 2014 Farm Bill, and then in 2017, we had state legislation that allowed us to grow hemp in Wisconsin. 2018 is the first year of our pilot program. And then in 2019, we're now entering our second year, and our legislature is just about to introduce new legislation that will get us in alignment with the 2018 Farm Bill. There, okay. So under the 2014 Farm Bill, we have a definition of hemp, and actually under the 2014 Farm Bill, the definition was for industrial hemp, and it talks about the plant cannabis sativa and any part of that plant, whether growing or not, with a delta-9 THC concentration of not more than 0.3% THC on a dry weight basis is industrial hemp. Now, under the 2018 Farm Bill, we include all parts of the plant, derivatives, extracts, cannabinoids, isomers, acids, and salts of isomers. And so this really makes sure that every part of this plant has the definition of hemp. And while we are working under the 2014 Farm Bill in our program, we're actually now working with this new definition. So that's the way that it is. And so under the 2018 Farm Bill, interstate commerce of hemp is legal. And oops. What's happening?
They're not seeing the presentation.
Oh, okay.
Just say, maybe pause for a
Okay,
moment.
we need to, okay. So under the 2018 Farm Bill, interstate commerce of hemp is legal. You do need to be aware that not all states have hemp programs, and so if you are going to take hemp from one state to another, if you're going from one hemp state to another, you probably have nothing to worry about. If you're going through some other states that do not have hemp programs and hemp is not legal in those states, you need to educate yourself on where those states are and what their laws are, because you could have your crop seized in some of those states, and your hemp could get really tied up, and nobody wants that. So just make sure you know where you're going with your hemp. It's also an agricultural commodity under the 2018 Farm Bill, so we should expect to see that banking is going to open up and crop insurance, although for the crop insurance, there needs to be some estimate of what crop values are. And so this is kind of what's going to hold up crop insurance for the short term. States must submit their hemp regulatory plans to USDA for approval. And this is where the states will all start to come under the 2018 Farm Bill with our programs. And we have to wait for USDA to get their program in place before we can even submit our plans. So they're not asking for our plans, they're asking us to hold off until they get their programs set up. So that's what we're waiting for. And so all of these 2018 Farm Bill things that I've mentioned here are in place, but we're still with the 2014 pilot research program for now. So for our program, we are operating under the state emergency rule ATCP 22. And this is what we were doing last year in 2018, and we are still under this rule for 2019. We had our first seeds in the ground in 2018. We license growers and processors. We have no limits on acreages or licenses. Fiber, grain, seed, and CBD end uses are all allowed. We do not license retail operations. Okay. If you are a grower, then you have submitted your application with your GPS coordinates. If you change your location, you're going to need to let us know what your new locations are. We need to know where those are for our program, and we also provide information to law enforcement. And so law enforcement, they do contact us, and they ask us, is this location licensed for hemp? And we want to be able to tell them that it is. And so you're safeguarding your own growing operation by letting us know where your coordinates are. This is a fee-based program, and we do have a slide on the fees, and we'll be talking about those in a minute, but if you've already applied, you do know what some of those are. Our background check is currently at the state level, and so our background check goes through our Department of Justice. Under the 2018 Farm Bill, when we do get to that part of the program, we will be doing a federal background check, and then we'll be letting everyone know how that needs to occur. We may be doing that for 2020, but for now we're with the state background check. The research summary is we have under the 2014 Farm Bill, and the research agreement also under the 2014 Farm Bill. When our program comes under the 2018 Farm Bill, these things will go away because we'll no longer be in a research pilot program. Excuse me, these are our fees. So we have the license one-time fee of $150 up to 30 acres and $5 per acre from 31 to 199 acres with a $1,000 lifetime maximum. We have an annual registration fee of $350. So you can get a license and not actually grow if you don't get a registration. If you just want to get your license and then maybe next year get a registration, you can do that. The processing license is an annual registration of $100. Sampling and testing, we charge $250 per sample. This is for us to come out and collect the sample and also to take it to the lab and have it tested. And this goes to our regulatory lab at DATCP. If you have a business and you're operating as a business, there is a change in operations manager. If your operations manager took a different job or whatever, for $15, then you can change that operations manager on your license. And then for a license amendment, what is a license amendment? If you're changing your locations or you're changing the amount of acreage you're going to grow, you do need to submit a license amendment. The first change, so if you have 3 or 4 changes, basically submitting one license amendment should cover those. If you submit more license amendments, then you will need to pay $50 after that first license amendment. So on sampling and testing, each field and variety is sampled and tested by DATCP. So if you have multiple varieties, each variety will need a sample. If you have one variety but your fields are a distance apart, each field does have to be tested. And if you have the same variety but you have planted at different times, so they're actually going to mature at different times, that's going to require different samples for that. Those differences in times as well. Each sample must test below 0.3% THC. And if it does not, ultimately it would have to be destroyed. We do allow 1 retest per failed field or variety, but that does involve us coming out and resampling and an additional fee to you of the $250. I do want to maybe just step back a minute and say when we're doing the sampling, we will come out and we will take the top 2 inches of a certain number of plants to have a representative sample. So we're collecting a composite sample and we're testing the crop. So if you have a certain number of plants, if you have 15 or fewer plants, we would probably test most of those plants. If you have 100 acres, then we're not going to test more than 30 plants. And we're taking the top 2 inches of the plants. For CBD growers, I know that there are some concerns that we're taking your best buds. This sampling method is standardized across all the regulatory states. And we want to have standardized procedures because we want you to be able to move your crops across state lines if that's what you want to do. And if we have standardized procedures with other states, then that's going to allow that movement of your samples, so and of your crop. So crops that fail must be destroyed, and we do have a destruction form for that, and we also we'll talk to you about that. We want to know, how do you propose to destroy your crop? And so we're asking you for that, and we want to work with you on that, but they do have to be destroyed in some fashion. We do give you a Fit for Commerce certificate for crops that pass. So for every variety sample that passes, you get a Fit for Commerce certificate, and then you can give that a copy of that certificate to your processor, so it goes with the crop. And I would just mention that law enforcement's very involved in a variety of things around the state, and they may come across your crop at some point in the process, and having a copy of the Fit for Commerce certificate can help them too, and help your crop just to move through the process that you want to move it through. So we are testing total THC, or sometimes we call it total delta 9 THC, because when THCA is heated, it converts to delta 9 THC. And so for our tests, and under the 2018 Farm Bill, they will require this as well. We are doing, because our samples are tested using the HPLC method of testing, this conversion factor is used to calculate the total THC. And so when you're, if you get to look at some lab forms, and you will see on those all these profiles for cannabinoids and all these different levels of cannabinoids, you'll see that delta 9 THC is one amount and the THCA is another amount, but you can't add those two numbers together to get total THC. You have to have the conversion factor. So when you look at those profiles, you can get a little bit confused by all the numbers, but this is how total THC is calculated. So our samples are tested by our regulatory lab. Our lab does not provide any service directly to the public or to law enforcement or anyone else. They only work for our DATCP programs, and they do a lot of regulatory work. That's their total purpose. And our test should not be used for anything but the regulatory aspect. So we don't provide information on other cannabinoids. It's not intended to help you with your CBD levels or anything like that. This is just one specific purpose for our testing. There are some private labs available in Wisconsin, and certainly any grower is welcome to send samples to private labs in Wisconsin or outside of Wisconsin to have your cannabinoids levels tested. And I know last year a number of growers who wanted their CBD levels as high as they could get them without having their THC levels get too high, were sending some samples regularly to some of the private labs so that they could kind of achieve their results on the CBD levels without losing their crop through too high of a THC level. So you might just want to think about that. I know there's been a fair amount of talk about us actually certifying private labs to do regulatory testing. That is a considerable workload, and we haven't worked on that. We haven't been able to do any of that at this time. We're just trying to do the basics of the program for right now, and if we don't do the basics, nothing happens. So we got to get that done so that everyone can just grow hemp. So that's just where we are in a workload. And eventually we expect that we will be doing some of this, but it just isn't going to happen for 2019. So these are our hemp program statistics for 2018. We had 245 grower licenses issued, 99 processor licenses issued, And of the licenses for registrations to grow, 185 growers registered, 135 growers actually planted, and we had 82 processors registered. And I would just mention that, well, if anyone was growing anything last year, you know that a lot of fields were flooded across all crops. And so not everyone harvested for just a whole variety of reasons, but the weather was a huge, huge factor. So in acreage, we had 1,850 field acres and 22 total greenhouse acres were actually planted. And then as far as our samples were collected, here you see in this picture, one of our inspectors is out taking samples. We collected 295 samples across 60 counties in Wisconsin, and so we were in all corners of the state, including Bayfield County, so as far north as you can go. 274 passed, which I think is really good. 21 failed, 4 retested, and all failed. And so you might want to think about the retests, although we did have one situation where we had 2 plots and they were really close together and they were the same variety. And they said they wanted them all tested together, and that crop failed. And they said, could we separate them out? And we did, and one plot passed and one plot failed. So that's just, a consideration. There's just so many variables with this crop. One variety failed consistently, and that was C4. And so we were just telling people not to grow it at all this year. We want you to succeed. And so if we have something that just completely and totally failed every single time, we're just going to tell you don't grow it because we want you to succeed. So for 2019, these numbers are estimates for right now, but because we're still doing paperwork and still working in the system, so we don't have final numbers. But what we do have is 2,186 total applications so far for this year. Of course, our application period ended March 1st, and so we're still trying to finish up paperwork. And 1,468 growers have applied. This is 6 times as many growers as last year. 718 processors have applied. This is 7 times as many as last year. So this is the workload that we're dealing with, and there's a lot of you folks out there who are going to grow and process hemp. So that's great. And I'm going to pass this presentation now on to Brenda, and she's going to talk for the rest of the presentation.
All right, well, hello everybody. I am Brenda von Rueden. I just started about a month ago with DATCP as the hemp program manager, and I'm going to cover basically the reporting and paperwork side of things for this program. So now that you're a licensed hemp grower, what do you need to do? We're going to start out with talking about purchasing your seeds. If you haven't already, you'll want to do that. There's on our website, you can go to DATCP, it's datcp.wi.gov, and you can search industrial hemp, and there's a lot of information out there, a lot of links you can click on. There's links to CBD varieties approved by DATCP. There's DATCP licensed sources. These are DATCP licensed seed labelers who have reported to us that they sell hemp seed, so you can find some information there. There's links to other states' websites. You can find probably seed sources or processing information on other states' websites as well. And one thing I do want to touch on for the grain and fiber growers, while the law does not require that you plant seed that is certified, we highly recommend it. Certified seed is more likely to produce a crop that meets the THC limits. And if you plant non-certified, you're going to want to plan accordingly in case your crop goes hot. Next, so you're probably in the phase of figuring out where you're going to be planting, what fields you're going to be choosing. So you've applied for your license, you've got some locations on there, but you may need to make some amendments. Again, it's on our website under reporting and record keeping. So you can go out to that website, you'll find under reporting and record keeping, you'll find the forms on the right-hand side of the page. This form must be completed and submitted in order to modify growing acreage or location or processing locations. No hemp growing or processing is authorized at locations not registered for the current growing season. For the 2019 growing and processing year, the First Amendment is free. Additional amendments may incur a fee of $50, and additional license fees will be assessed if growing acreage exceeds the amount included in the license. Oh, I didn't. Oh, what happened? Oh, I didn't even touch it.
Go ahead.
What's happening? There you go. Sorry, technical difficulty.
There we go.
Thank you. Okay, so with amendments again, so I think because of the license extension period, they decided to waive that First Amendment fee, the $50 fee. So if you do need to make changes, you can go ahead and do that. Like I said, find the form out on the website, fill that out. The preferred method for you to get that back to us quickly is grab it off the web, fill it out, and there's an email link that's active at the bottom of the form. Just click that link, and then you can send that directly back to us. And then our licensing staff will get those amendments changed, and you'll be notified that they've been changed. If you don't have access to the internet or to print these forms off, you can give us a call, and we can get the forms mailed to you. I know we have some growers out there that don't have access to phone and email, so we can always find a way to get it to you, and then you can just mail it back to us. So next is the planting reports. So every grower is required to fill out a planting report. We have two types of planting reports. One is for greenhouses and one is for field planting. These reports must be submitted within 30 days after planted or by July 1st, whichever comes first. If you haven't planted by July 1st, you're going to want to avoid license suspension by submitting your planting report that says you did not grow yet. And then once you do grow, you can submit as soon as possible once you get your hemp in the ground. Our 2019 planting reports, like I said, I just came on board, so I'm kind of learning right along with you all. Our forms are all being updated, our website's being updated constantly, so you can use currently the 2018 planting reports. They are available on the website, both the field report and the greenhouse report. So just feel free to use those. We'd rather have a report than not have one. And we're hoping to have the 2019s updated and out there very soon. So, like I said, if you grow in a greenhouse, you must complete the report. If you grow in a field, you have to complete the report. There's two different ones for you to choose from. And like Melody mentioned earlier, this planting data and your license data is issued to law enforcement. So just want you to be aware of that. We are starting to issue a monthly, or we will be issuing a monthly update to law enforcement. So when you do make amendments, those changes will be provided to them. I think too, with all these forms, you know, it's a new program. We're trying to do the best we can with the forms. We'll definitely take suggestions from growers. If there's something on the form that you just don't understand or something that is not clear, feel free to give me a shout or, you know, email us. And if you have better ideas of how these could work, we'll definitely take your suggestions. So why we require a 30-day harvest notification and estimated harvest date. This is where you log on your planting reports. You kind of tell us, we can figure out your 30-day harvest notification. But what's important to us is the estimated harvest date. This gives us notification of when we can try to plan our testing or our sampling. We require the lead time to organize and staff sampling assignments. So last minute sampling requests could result in delayed DATCP sampling of your crop. We had a few people last year, I believe, that kind of called last minute, and they wanted us, they called on a Friday and wanted us there on a Monday. That's just not going to work, especially this year with the amount of growers out there. So keep that in mind. You really want to, figure out your plan, and if you think things are starting to look like they need to be tested, just stay in touch with us. Call us, email us. The more communication, the better. And again, if you don't have access to phone or email, you can send us a letter. Make sure you include your name of the license holder, the license number, location of the crop and variety, and your expected harvest date. Or you can use a liaison contact that can get in touch with DATCP. So just keep that in mind. And again, to continue on with, staying in communications, this is where you need to provide us dependable contact information. We have so many emails right now that come back to us that are invalid. So phone, email, make sure we have your up-to-date contact information. We're going to need to be communicating with you. The sampling staff will be calling you directly, setting up times to schedule the test. So keep in mind, if no communication happens between you and the sampling staff, it'll be scheduled and it'll be sampled with or without your input. And again, for the folks who don't have access to email or phone, send us that letter or use a liaison that can get in touch with us. Very important. And so then Melody touched on the testing side of things, but I'm just going to touch on after the sample is tested. So you will receive a copy of your results, and then you will be required to pay the lab sampling fee, whether your crop passed or failed. So if the sample passed, you will receive your Fit for Commerce certificate, and you will pay your lab fees. If your sample failed, you will be sent a destruction report to complete, and you will still have to pay your lab fee invoice. So keep in mind, any unpaid lab fees will be referred to the Wisconsin Department of Revenue for collection in accordance to existing laws for the referral of unpaid debt or services rendered. So talking about the testing and if your test fails. Like Melody mentioned, you have an option to do a second testing. That's totally up to you, and that is at your cost, at the grower's cost. So the destruction report is another report that's available on the reporting and record keeping website. This destruction report, if you have to destruct, you'll be required to complete this at the time of your crop destruction. The destruction is to be documented, and you are to destroy and return the destruction report within 10 days of receiving the failed notification. So once you're notified, it could be by phone, it could be by email. I'm here to try to get a process in place. So right now we just don't really have a process. We'll probably be doing, the mailing the letter, getting your test results so you're notified. And then we'll work with you closely to help you through this process. Obviously, it may be a frustrating process for you, but we're here to help. So that requirement, again, within 10 days of receiving the notification, you'll need to destruct. You'll want to include before and after pictures during the destruction process and include that with your report. And the department will conduct an inspection to verify that the crop was destroyed as required. If the crop has not been destroyed, the department may destroy the crop and invoice the licensed grower for any or all costs associated with the destruction. And with that, that is the paperwork side of things. At the end of the year, basically, there is another report that's required, which is an annual growing report, and we'll worry about that in another seminar.
Okay. So at this point, we'll take some questions. We'll start going through the questions that were entered in the chat box and let DATCP respond to those. And if you joined in with us late, I'll just give you a little bit of a summary of what I talked about at the very beginning. The way this webinar is going to run is we'll do the presentations on the hour every hour, and then we'll follow up with questions until all the questions have been answered. And then we will start with the next presentation on the next hour on the dot. So Leia's gonna ask some questions that were entered into the chat box, and then we'll let Department of Ag folks respond.
Sure. So we have just so that all those that are listening and checked in order for us to track your questions, if you can please log them into the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of your screen right next to the chat box. And then, because there are some questions that are in the chat box, and I can see them because I'm on the webinar, but Tony, the guy who's managing our meeting, cannot. So how about, there's just one on that chat that I see, and I will ask that to you guys, and then we'll read through the questions that have been asked in that Q&A box. So the question on the chat was asking about crop insurance. They've gone to their local office and haven't been able to get information on crop insurance and what is the protocol if hemp is covered.
I would say you probably have been in the right place to ask about crop insurance. I think it's probably going to take a while for crop insurance to be available. I have been on some panels with insurance representatives who have talked about crop insurance, and I know at least I believe at least one insurance group that insures farms and farming said that they would, if the barn burned, they'd insure the barn, but they wouldn't not insure the hemp crop right now. So there's that kind of, like if you're already involved in farming, they still are going to provide insurance. If you had a combine and the combine burned up while harvesting hemp, they would insure the combine but not the hemp crop. So I think insurance is going to take a while because what I have heard from insurance groups is that they still need a value. They need a crop value. And so like for corn and soybeans, they have crop values. They know what those crops are worth. And for hemp, they don't really have a standardized value. And so it's just going to take time. It's going to come, but it will take time. So it may not be this year, but it will come eventually.
And this is a problem that we see in lots of alternative crops, that there's limited insurance options. So not just hemp.
Right.
So we're going to move to the questions that have been entered into the Q&A. And do you want me to come up there?
Can you read them, Tony? Sure. I'm having trouble. I'm too old to read this right here.
It's really small on the screen. So the first questions come from Rebecca and Chris from Pepin County, potentially looking at growing in 2020. The question is, should we get a license now in preparation for next growing season, or should we wait?
So you have to wait now because our licensing period ended on March 1st. So you will need to wait, and so probably this fall. A year ago for 2019, our licensing registration period opened on November 1st of 2018. I'm not 100% sure what our timeline is, but it will be late fall that we would open the licensing process. So So you do need to wait now until later this year to apply for a license for 2020.
Okay, the next question comes from Kyle Bushman. Actually, we have two. First, can we get a copy of the THC/CBD testing results by varieties and harvest dates from 2018?
Yes, so this one's on me. So I do need to put out an annual report and include all those test results. And I just haven't had time to do that. But I'm hoping in the next couple of weeks to just get those out so you can see what all the test results are. And once I get those out, that will be on our website, so you'll be able to see that information.
The next question was, after you get an approved for commerce certificate, how long does the grower have to harvest the crop?
Ideally, we would like that harvested within 10 days of when you get your certificate, and the THC content continues to go up. And so what you need to know is that THC content is going to continue to go up, and we're going to issue the certificate. If you wait a long time to harvest that and the THC is going up considerably, once you harvest that crop and it goes to retail or to processing or wherever it goes, if law enforcement comes in and they take a sample of that and they have it tested and it's above 0.3%, you could still lose that crop. So it's to your advantage to harvest as soon as possible once we test as well.
Next question comes from Ashley. If you start your plants in a greenhouse and transplant to a field, do you have to do both planting reports?
That's a good question. I would say no. I would say you would want to put on your field planting report that you started it in a greenhouse, and you do want your coordinates of the greenhouse. Just because if anyone reports you or anything and law enforcement comes by and then that's not, an approved location. So you want to make sure you have the location approved, but you would say on your report, just starting seeds in this greenhouse at this location.
Here's a comment and a question. C037801 says, I found the reporting site very cumbersome. Will it be improved?
Yes. Yes. So yeah, just keep in mind we've been very short-staffed, and with me coming on board, I'm going to try and clean that up, make it very user-friendly, and so please, thank you, be patient, it'll come.
So if you haven't registered for that year, do you have to submit a report by July 1st?
I would say yes, because there's an option on there that says did not grow.
But if you didn't register to grow,
oh no,
we wouldn't expect a report.
No. Yeah.
Okay. So if you only got a license but you didn't register to grow, we would not expect a report.
Okay. Can I get contact info on private labs for testing?
If you email the DATCP Hemp email address and request that, we can send you the names of the labs that we are aware of.
Is that a possibility of putting that together on an extension website for a resource?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's something that we could work on between us. Will this presentation be available as a PDF or a PowerPoint? We could do that. We could also put that on the website. So yes, thank you for that point. If we use starts that are 25 days old at planting, is it 30 days after planted in field or 30 days after seeds are germinated?
It would be 30 days after planted in the field. So we want it, it applies to the harvest location. So once it's planted in the field, that's when we would want your report.
Do you have resources available to connect us with buyers?
No, we do not, unfortunately.
Of the tested samples, how many that failed were C4?
I don't have that answer for you right now.
Does the Hemp 2.0 bill contain legislation to bump the THC limits to 0.7 or 1.0? Is it likely?
No, and just the 0.3% THC is this is under federal law, and so we are being compliant with federal law. We do have a provision. The provision that we have is if it's above 0.3, but at 1% or below, it's not considered a law enforcement action. So if you have hemp that's in between those percentages, it's not considered actionable under law enforcement. So that's something that we work with you on. If it's over 1%, could be considered actionable by law enforcement, just so you know.
Would I need 2 tests for the same strain if some are grown in greenhouse and some are grown in the field, but still the same strain?
Yes, you would. And those are likely to be at different THC percentages, I'll tell you now.
How do you account for the degradation of THC once it's been cut? You would have a plant that is cut is at 0.4, but degrades below the limit in the sun in a day.
We don't account for that.
Okay. And when testing the tops of the plant, you are taking the highest localized average THC content. Most of the plant is well below. Why did you opt for this testing the tops over a whole plant average?
Because we want the highest THC content that's in that plant, and that does, and this is true for all states in this program, so this is a very standardized process.
We plan to start in the greenhouse and transplant, then grow additional plants in the greenhouse. I would assume we need both in this case.
You would need both tested, correct?
Do you know when banks will be able to give us loans?
I don't. I do know that some banks are giving loans, and my understanding is some of the credit unions are probably more likely to give loans than the traditional banks. The Wisconsin Banking Association is probably going to come online a little bit later, but there are loans being available, and I think that if you're growing hemp, you're more likely to get a loan. If you have a vape shop, you're less likely to get a loan, I'll tell you. So.
Testing per strain, $250 per strain per plot. Can you go into more detail? Testing per strain, question mark?
Well, strain for us equals variety, so we are taking the top 2 inches of the plant. We're testing for the THC content. It needs to be at or below 0.3%. And when we say 0.3%, we're rounding down, so it can be 0.399%, and we're still going to call it 0.3%. So that's the most variability that we can give. And beyond that, I'm not sure.
They might be asking if each cultivar has to be tested.
So each cultivar, each variety, each strain. For me, cultivar, variety, and strain are all the same thing. And so yes, each one must have its own test.
Is there a 2018 summary for the hemp program that will be made available?
There will be. We're just, due to staffing restrictions, we just haven't had time to get that out. And we'll put it on our website.
Okay, thanks. And we could try to link to it once we have an extension site up and running. Lots of comments about hail insurance. I guess there is hail insurance available that covers industrial hemp up to $8,000 per acre. Is there a way to still get a license even after the March cutoff?
No, not for this year.
Okay, how long before sampling takes place and notification?
We need notification from the growers. We want 30 days notification so that we can schedule the workload. There's going to be a lot of sampling. We've already been collecting samples this year from greenhouses. So.
Okay. Are there limits in the distance between hemp fields under one license holder? I have fields that will be planted across at least 2 counties.
No, there are no limits on this.
What are the laws regarding transporting a harvested crop?
We do not have laws that really apply to that. So our laws apply to the crop, primarily to the crop being grown. And so once we issue the Fit for Commerce certificate, you can transport that crop. You cannot transport it until we have given you a Fit for Commerce certificate to do so. then you would be out of compliance with our program. But once we issue that, you can transport your crop and wherever you want to transport it.
What determines the 3% THC rate? How is it decided that would be the level, and why has the number of growers increased by 6 to 7 times as opposed to previous years?
So the THC level, how this number was arrived at, I do not know. This is federal law, and so I'm not sure how they arrived at this number. It is somewhat arbitrary, actually. So why 0.3%? I truly do not know the answer to that. And what was the second?
Oh yeah, well, this is only the second year.
Oh, right. Yeah, this is only the second year. This is based on people's interests. We have no control over this.
So the 0.3% is an arbitrary number, and it was what was in the 2014 Farm Bill is what was used to differentiate industrial hemp from marijuana and cannabis, and it was an arbitrary number. Very low, obviously. Yeah, and then as for the interest, it's the second year, but also the 2018 federal Farm Bill probably has impacted that. It's very good.
Greenhouses, is there a certain size requirement?
There is not, but we do. We want a minimum of 15 plants at harvest time, so that we can get enough material to test. If you only have 2 or 4 plants, we might end up taking your whole crop just to be able to get a test result.
Can I grow a variety that's not on your approved list?
You can. We would like to approve that. We'd like to know what that variety is, and so we would like you to send an email to our DATCP email and say, I want to plant this variety, and hopefully you have the test results from the crop that seed came from, and then we can look at that. We want your crops to pass the THC test, and we have had people ask if they could plant a variety that the crop had already tested over 0.3%. So we want you to succeed. So this is why we want to see what it is you want.
Are there considerations to restrict the use of dangerous pesticides and highly polluting industrial practices in hemp?
There are currently no pesticides allowed for use on hemp. Hemp is a bioaccumulator too, so what's in the soil it's probably going to take up. So there are no tolerances for hemp that's going to be used for food, no pesticide tolerances.
And I think Rodrigo, maybe when we get into the UW section, maybe you could touch on what might get done for evaluating. Okay. I'm going to skip over anything that seems agronomic because we're going to be getting into that next. So for testing purposes, how will you treat breeding populations? How will you support small and independent farmer breeders?
Well, anything that's being harvested and being sold, we have to test. We have a situation where people are growing mother plants that then they want to sell the clones of. If you're not harvesting something and it's not going into the stream, commercial stream, we don't necessarily need to test it, but we do need still all the licenses and permits and everything, and we may come out and do some inspections.
Someone's pushing back on your pesticide comment that there's a list of approved pesticides on your website.
There's a list of like organic pesticides. But there's so you can, and that is on our website, but it's really limited.
All right. What is the time frame expected to receive test results once the testing has been done?
Our lab allows for 2-week turnaround time. So we last year, once we got up and running, the test results for the most part came back a lot quicker than that. But they have said that they won't guarantee anything less than 2 weeks.
Does DATCP need a copy of my seed/clone certification before I plant?
I don't know what that means.
Okay.
Purchase order, seed purchase order.
Oh, seed purchase, like a seed purchase order. We don't really do that. No.
Okay, and the seeds don't have to be certified.
They
It's
don't
just
have
that they're recommended to be so.
Correct.
If you take clones from a crop that passed testing, will those clones have to be tested even though they have the exact same genetics as the approved?
So once those plants are grown, we do need to come and test, and the THC content can be highly variable depending on the inputs and conditions grown. So there's no guarantees that what you're growing will pass.
Are there requirements for soil testing prior to planting?
No.
And if that's a nutrient management question, that will be touched on a little bit later by Rodrigo as well, because we'll be trying to develop nutrient management recommendations. I already did that. Number of days after you come out to test until we receive the results.
It's somewhat variable, so we'll take the result, we'll take the sample, we bring the samples back directly to our lab. They have a 2-week turnaround time, and then they get the results to us, and then we get the results to you. So this year I think things will be more efficient than last year. So last year we had no staff, and we were doing the sampling too, so we couldn't be everywhere, but I think we'll be more efficient than we were last year, but can't give you a guarantee on number of days right now.
How many days after you take the sample do we have to harvest?
Should be.
So this was asked earlier, but it's within that 10-day mark.
Isn't the actual limit on THC 0.3999, not 0.3?
No, it's 0.3%. It's just rounded down. So.
We have 30 acres. Should we plant all of, that's an agronomic question, so we'll take that later. If we plant indoors and transfer to the field, are those two different planting reports? Oh, I think that was the answer. Do we get the 2 inches of plants that you tested back?
No.
Okay. I believe that was asked already. Can the licensed grower rent land for growing from someone else?
Yes.
I have
Yes.
one quick question. So if a grower has 2 adjacent greenhouses or adjacent fields, how is that going to be tested? And let's say the grower has 2 fields and the fields are half a mile apart. I assume those are 2 different
Those are 2
tests.
separate. If the fields are right next to each other, the inspector has a lot of discretion because they're out there looking at the actual situation. We don't want to charge people more than we have to. So if they're right next to each other, it's the same variety. They look the same. We might do 1 test, but we ask the grower. We could do 1 test or we could do 2 tests. We do 1 test, it fails. You have to destroy everything. If we do 2 tests, if there's any reason, like if you put more fertilizer on one than the other one, you might have different results. So,
Is there a way to electronically sign forms for replying by email, or do they have to be signed and scanned?
I think if you use the PDF option, I guess that's something we'll have to discuss further.
Am I able to amend my growing location from only a field to a field and an indoor grow? Outdoor being hemp for seed and indoor being a CBD variety.
yes, as long as the indoor is not your residence. So we don't allow residential growing. So if it's in a greenhouse or an indoor grow facility, that's fine. And we need the GPS coordinates for those locations.
Okay, I'm going to end on this one because I think it's a good one. As a grower, do I need to take it upon myself to preemptively notify my county law enforcement, or will DATCP do that?
No, absolutely. Take it upon yourself. Get in touch with your local representatives or your local law enforcement agencies, your neighbors, anybody that you think will be concerned with the process.
All right, and with that, there's many more questions. So just so everyone knows, we will also, at noon, we will have Rodrigo Worley. We'll talk about the UW research this year, but then he'll finish up in like 10 to 15 minutes. Leah will have something briefly to say, and then we'll leave 45 minutes from about 12:15 to 1 o'clock to try to clean up any questions that we have. Seems there's probably going to be more questions than we'll ever be able to get to today. So, but we appreciate all the participation. There's 316 people in here, so this is great. So without further ado, we're going to move into the next section. As the PowerPoint is loading, I'll keep talking slow.